Hey there! So today I thought we could talk about the most disappointing books that I've read in 2023 or attempted to read, because actually I DNF'd most of the books that I wasn't really enjoying, which I'm quite proud of myself for doing, because there's really no point in continuing on if you're not enjoying something. There's only one book that I finished that, looking back on it now, I actually probably should have just DNF'd, to be honest. And that is Passenger by Alexandra Bracken. I picked up this book because it was the summertime and I wanted something kind of summery, and this is about pirates. I love the author's other series, the Darkest Mind series, back in the days of the dystopian novels, and this just sounded so cool. It was described as a treasure hunt through time, and that just sounded super interesting to me. Unfortunately, it really did not end up living up to my expectations. It was frankly quite boring. I didn't really connect to the main characters that much. It was just really slow to get through. I was questioning whether I should keep going for most of the book, and probably should have just, DNF'd this. But because I like the author and there were parts of the world building that was interesting, the parts about how time travel works, I think if I had read this back when it came out in 2016, I might have enjoyed this more. But at this point, it was just not my cup of tea, unfortunately. Yeah, and I ended up giving this book 2 stars. It wasn't terrible, but unfortunately, I was just not hooked. Okay, so now moving on to the books that I DNF'd this year, which were 3. And the first one I got from the library, so I don't have it here, which is also maybe why it was a bit easier for me to decide to just DNF it. And that was Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. I had heard so much about this book. So many people seem to really have enjoyed it. And I love the idea of a cozy fantasy because I love fantasy books in general. And honestly, sometimes I don't think the stakes need to be this high. We don't need to always read about somebody saving the entire world. Unfortunately, this book didn't quite work for me. This book is about a retired orc who decides to settle down and open up a coffee shop in this small town, which sounded like a great idea, but ultimately I just ended up not really caring about her story and whether she was succeeding or not. Even though I don't think the stakes need to be super high, but I do need to be invested in the story to want to continue reading, and in this case, I just wasn't. I also felt like the writing style didn't quite mesh with me. It just felt very simple and maybe a little clunky. And I honestly don't know whether that is like the author's writing or whether that ended up being the translation, because I did read this in the German translation. So yeah, I'm not gonna give up on cozy fantasy just because I didn't quite like this one. It was just one that I just tried, got it from the library. I really wanted to like the book, but unfortunately in the end it just wasn't quite for me. Hopefully another cozy fantasy will, though. I tried out Traitor's Blade by Sebastian Ducastel, and I got a decent amount into it. I mean, you can see I still have my bookmark in here. I got to page 130, and there was a lot about this that I liked initially. It was just written very kind of in a fun style. I really enjoyed the banter between our 3 main characters. It's basically about these gray coats who used to have all this respect and glory when their king was still alive, but now that their king is dead, they're very much looked down upon. Yeah, it started off and I was sure that I was gonna love this book. Or maybe not love, but I was like, oh, this is easily gonna be a 4-star read. Because I enjoyed the writing style. It was quick to read, and I was just like, yeah, let's go. but unfortunately, the further I read, the more troubles I had with the female characters. I just felt like there were so many just stereotypical roles that they were put in. We have the evil seductress, and the wife of the main character, unfortunately, just gets fridged right away. She is sexually assaulted and then killed, so he can have a tragic backstory. And just at this point in time, I just feel like I'm over it. We had one more female character in this beginning chunk who is a member of the nobility, and she just, she just doesn't understand the complexities of all this political maneuvering going on. So she needs the help of our main character. And at that point, I just decided that I don't think we're gonna be friends, me and this book. And honestly, to other people, this might not bother them that much. It wasn't terribly written, but just at this point in time, I just don't want to have to put up with anything like that in my fantasy. So I just decided to put it down. Maybe no. So about to say maybe someday I'll try again, but you know what? No, there's just so many other books that I would love to read that sometimes if there's something that is bothering you in a book, it's totally okay to put it down and try with a different book. And then last but not least, this was probably just my biggest disappointment and the one that I had the hardest time actually putting down, because I really liked this author's other work and I had high hopes, and I was just always hoping, oh, it's gonna get better. It's gonna get better, right? But unfortunately, Swordcatcher by Cassandra Clare, I gave this book like 220 pages and it has 800, and at that point I was just like, I can't keep going and hoping that it's gonna get better, because in that time that it would take me to read this 800-page book, like I could be reading something else that I could be enjoying way more. So I put it down. It was just nothing was happening. That was probably the main thing that made it hard to read for me, is just we were getting introduced to characters, but I just felt like it was such a big info dump. Not even like an info dump, but it just felt like she was writing all this backstory, and we could have maybe, been introduced to some of the backstory later on, but a lot of this felt unnecessary. A lot of it felt like it could have been shortened and edited better. Ultimately, I just didn't care about these characters, which was so weird because in other series by Cassandra Clare, I care about the characters a lot. And the other aspect that just didn't really work for me in this book was the world building. It just, to me, was not very well done, and at times even made me feel a little uncomfortable. And I was just so excited to read something by Cassandra Clare that wasn't in the Shadowhunters universe. Yeah, basically this book is about Kel, who is picked out from an orphanage to become the crown prince's sword catcher, meaning that he's always by his side, protecting him, and also has to pretend to be him at certain functions where they expect that it could be dangerous. And our other protagonist, I don't even remember what she was called, to be honest. She's kind of like a healer, and her best friend is sick. That's all that I know about her, to be honest. Yeah, still pretty sad that this one didn't work for me. Ultimately, I'm just really glad that at this point in my reading journey, I have become so confident with just letting books go that don't work for me. And my main goal is kind of that if I think it's gonna be lower than a 3, I'm just gonna DNF it, because there's just no reason to keep going. Unless, of course, there's a reason. If I am just reading it for fun, I'm gonna stop if it's not at least gonna be a 3-star book. Of course, if it's something that you need to read for school or university or another like important reason, then just you need to keep going. But if just for me, if I'm reading something that I'm not enjoying, it just really halts my momentum so much, or ultimately it could put you in a reading slump. Anyway, so those were my most disappointing reads or books that I attempted to read for 2023. And for 2024, I just am hoping that I'm gonna be just as ruthless and just DNF the things that aren't my cup of tea, so I can have the time to read the things that I do enjoy. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, you can subscribe down below and maybe leave me a comment telling me a book that you have DNF'd this last year, or one that you really wish you just had. Bye!